is an approach to data warehousing that I've been developing the last couple of years, and it kind of fell out of my frustrations, I guess, with Data Vault. Sorry, Patrick.
I'm not married to it.
So it's just I took Data Vault, all the issues I had with it, and I stripped out all the guff. I applied Occam's razor, cut out all the stuff that we didn't need, and to come up with something that was a lot simpler. So it's something we've tried. We've tried in a couple of projects now. It seems to work really well, and yeah, we're just trying to get people interested and see if they can do a few POCs and get some interest.
Very cool. Patrick, what have you invented? Kidding. Come on, what, is there anything in the intro that Peter missed?
Well, I mean, I've been working at Snowflake for 4.5 years, and before that as a Data Vault consultant. So I worked in the capacity of, with the likes of Dan Lindstedt and the inventors of Data Vault. And I'm the first to say that Data Vault is not without its problems, obviously. But it's also hard to say. If somebody says, if you get it right, that's also something you shouldn't say about a data modeling approach. It's like, well, you should be easy to do anyway. But I did that for a couple of years. I joined Snowflake particularly to do Snowflake work, but through just joining Snowflake, I was immediately put on projects to do Data Vault globally. So through that, I thought at the time that I wasn't going to be doing Data Vault anymore. Turns out I'm doing it all over the world now. And part of what I've been doing for the last couple of years is doing webinars, presentations, and blogs, lots of blogs, is customers sometimes find a particular problem. How do you solve it? And in particular, how do you solve it in Snowflake? So through that, I ended up creating a 2-hour workshop, which was presented to various customers, some in Germany, a lot in the US, a little bit in Australia. It ended up being shown globally because, yes, Andrew's probably seen it as well, is that there are intricacies on how to do it. I wouldn't say there's only one way to do something, but definitely some guidance was needed, especially coming from a Snowflake platform.
Great. So they both got the credentials. They both know what they're talking about. I think that's pretty obvious. Now, what I was saying is in the break, we were talking about the fact that 3 years ago at this conference, Joe Reese said, "Is data modeling dead?" And so we were talking, like, can we just, let's just say it's 2025. Data modeling is dead, is the hypothesis. Is that true?
Yes,
that
it
not?
is.
Yeah? All right, please,
Are we
go.
done? Okay.
Go.
No, of course not. Of course not. The way I see it is we work in data. Most people in this room have got data in their job title, so we should really understand the nature of data, the medium that we're actually using. And data modeling is that. That's exactly what it is. So it's just understanding the structures and how we should be structuring our data.
But can't I just ask Claude to tell me that stuff?
Of course you can. Of course you can, but does it have the correct context to be able to come up with a good model? And most of the time it's a judgment call. It's something that you need to look at options. I mean, there's a standing joke, I think, there is a data modeling joke, that if you ask 10 data modelers for a model, you'll get 11 models. It's all very, very subjective. There's always like different ways of doing things. So yeah, you can do that. Certainly you could put the question into an AI and it will give you an answer, but is it a good model?
How about you, Patrick? Is it dead?
I think it would never be dead in the sense that even today, a lot of the direction where AI is going right now is that you need to give it a semantic model, right? And when you start building a semantic model, what is it underneath? You're still identifying the 3 key things you want out of data every time. What are my entities and how to identify them? What are the relationships between entities? And what is the descriptive state of those entities and that relationship, right? It fits into a data vault because it's hubs, links, and satellites, data vault. But it's still the same thing that we're asking of any data model. Any data model that you get, even if it's not broken up into those table structures itself, it's still got those key things in the model itself. And with the age of AI, and if you were to try and build a semantic model without the context of what you want to do with it, you end up with garbage. So you have to give it enough context that it actually starts building something that's usable, and then you iterate over it. I know Peter started the panel with data modeling projects taking 5 years. That's 10, 15 years ago. It should never take that long these days. And that's why things like, or concepts like DBT became so popular, because you can just define what the query is and then productionize it, right? But now you could end up on the other side of the scale where you got, and I saw this 2 years ago at the Data Engine Bytes, somebody said they had 10,000 DBT models that they were managing. Now how do you manage that? On top of that, you're still running all the tests and everything on top of that. It's just turning credits for the various cloud service providers.
If anyone has a question, raise your hand and get my attention. But I think that's an interesting one. So you're saying what Peter said was kind of a myth. The situation has changed on from the conventional wisdom about this.
Should have.
What are the other myths that are there any other myths about data modeling that people are probably thinking in their heads that actually aren't true these days? Either of you.
I think one is that it takes a long time. Modeling takes a long time, and I guess it depends on how much what's enough in terms of how much modeling you need to do. So you can come up with a very, very good model very, very quickly. John Giles was presenting last week in Melbourne, talking about patterns and how to take a basic model, spin it up very, very quickly, verify it with the business, adjust it, and it can be done very, very quickly. Whereas I've worked on projects where they've burned 2, 3, 4 years trying to come up with the perfect model. So it's just, the myth is that it can take a long time. It can take a long time, but it needn't.
Another thing I heard 2 years ago at the Data Engine Bytes was that storage is cheap, so why should we model? The issue with that, even though it's cheap and you just dump the data and run your queries on it, that data is more often than not complex. Like it's got problems in there, it's got changing state. If you're repeatedly running the same queries on that same storage medium, it's the cost, the compute that goes up. Because you might be writing a similar query or the same query or running various queries on the same data, producing different results, competing results, and just churning more and more credits as you're trying to get those results in the first place. I think that proper data modeling comes into play is to solve that problem up front once and let simpler queries run on that same data.
All right, we got 2 myths busted already. We have a question. Thank you for being the brave soul to go first. Here we go.
Okay, so taking the other side, among the arguments that advocates of the proposition that modeling is dead, sometimes advanced, which one are you most sympathetic towards?
Sorry, so
like among sort of your I guess imagined opponents, the ones who are saying sort of we need not do data modeling, or modeling is becoming outdated or dead or unnecessary or whatever. Among the ones that you hear from these people, which of their arguments are you most sympathetic towards?
I can understand why they would say that the time that it takes to build those models is at the end of the day, the business want their data. They want to get hold of their data very, very quickly. I can understand why the argument would be, let's just push that data through straight away without modeling it, because it's a bottleneck. It is a bottleneck. So I can absolutely understand that argument. But again, what level of modeling can we do to give us the maximum best bang per buck, if you like? So there's not a hard answer there.
I would say that I don't think. Let's think about maybe the scale of the project, or maybe that you're only dealing with 3 or 4 data sources, and in fact, what a lot of customers do is just build an OBT, a one big table, but end of the day, it's still going to have business entities, relationships, and attributes in that table. Whether it's modeled into different structures or not. Starting small is good because maybe you don't have that need to model something that's more performant or efficient yet. But once you start to scale and you have lots of data sources, a lot of use cases, you're going to have to start to justify the costs of running that data platform to your execs. right? They're saying, well, why is it costing so much to run this information? And in fact, my existing queries are taking longer to run because now you've packed more data into the same platform to query. So when it starts to get to that scale, I would say is when customers should start to consider breaking that up and doing some proper data modeling. It doesn't have to be everything. I've worked at a Data Vault customer on Snowflake that we for sure allowed new use cases to skip the Data Vault. You don't need it, don't put it in there. But we were building sort of this maturity with we call it the aggregate domain, data mesh type terminology, where your data source can now be easily integrated with the other data sources already in that aggregate domain. Long story short, start small for sure. I mean, it for sure might be a waste of time to do data modeling right away. But eventually, when you want that efficiency and that scalability, you're going to have to start be more serious about your data modeling.
I think we got one right here in the front.
Can you share experiences on how you achieve like shared agreements? So how do you get people into the room and you're like, how do you avoid getting 10 people and having 11 different?
You gotta go speak to the business and show them some love.
But if you can share experiences about how you're doing that, what works, what doesn't work.
You go first while I think about that.
No problem. I think what's helped a lot is there needs to be some sort of leadership identified. When we started at a customer, we had a train of change that we wanted to do. We wanted to migrate off one platform and get onto Snowflake. But we started with a core team who were going to start building the highest value business cases first. And within that team, we identified strong modelers and strong engineers that maybe on the fringe of it, others needed a little more convincing, but somebody needed to take ownership of it. I later called it like a Data Vault product owner kind of thing. But there will be contention on certain things, but somebody needs to make a decision, but also the accountability of it, right? We were joking about it earlier, I think the other day or something. The one thing that you can't do with AI today is give it accountability, right? Another way of putting this is you can't sue AI. If it gets something wrong, what are you going to do? So there's always that human aspect and there's always accountability, and it's the same for me in data modeling as well.
Anything you'd add, Andrew?
Yeah, I guess in my experience, it's getting the right people in the room, to start off with, and selling the idea that what's it worth, what's in it for them, and that's often the hardest message to sell. So I think the counter argument is generally, well, what if you don't do it? What if you don't data model? What are the potential risks? So it's just kind of telling that story and getting people to understand that and getting engagement from the business so they can commit resources to that model.
Before I've got someone with a question. I mean, what maybe a good example would be, and obviously not naming names, but can you think of a project you've seen that did it wrong? Like, what is something not to do? You've sort of talked best practice.
I've got one or two. I worked at an energy retailer a few years ago, and there was this grand plan to build an enterprise data model. And they had a team of 3-4 people, and that project ran for probably 3 or 4 years. And they went into detail. They got people from all over the business to contribute to this model. And at the end of it, all they used it for is naming conventions for their data assets. That there was no structure. They weren't using the model itself. They were just using it to how do we name these fields in our data warehouse. It kind of seemed like a lot of effort for very little benefit.
Yeah, to interrogate the model to get the naming standards?
Yeah, kind of pointless. Yeah.
Okay.
You got any horror stories, Patrick?
I think similar to what Andrew's saying, trying to come in with a grand design and say, okay, now populate it is a problem. I have seen one use case almost 10 years ago, which was crazy. We were building a insurance enterprise model, but it was based on the industry standard from America. And they were trying to munge the data pipelines to fit this model. And it similar story. It was taking years, and it was a migration project, and there were penalties if they missed the deadlines, and there were big penalties. I think it's the same lesson. I guess you start small and then you iterate rather than trying to stuff everything into one model.
All right, I've got one over here.
Hi. Data modeling has a controversial, bad reputation as a sweeping generalization.
In what way?
Most every business area will normally complain about it. Most people, project managers, will complain that it's a bottleneck. Not saying that it's, individuals in particular, but often it is, it's not the, oh, thank God they did it at the time. It's over in hindsight and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So it's normally a tale where the value is realized for people rather than upfront. Do you think that it's actually part of the nature of framing it as modeling and having data modelers like this mystic dark art, that in reality, it's data documentation, it's contextual documentation, it's business documentation, and if it was framed in a more documentation-centric rather than this thing of, oh, it's modeling, it's like the data scientist, only a data scientist can know data scientist algorithms type stuff, and the data is actually much more everywhere, and it shouldn't be so secretive and special and unique. Do you think that there's a turning with AI that's starting saying that the need to express context and have good descriptions of what's there is actually going to break that sort of label of modeling to make it a much more, I want to say democratized, but it's a bit cliched, but make it a much more accessible and valued task? Because, as you say, the data's intrinsically got some modeling in it.
Yeah.
But teasing out models creates a distance between the consumer and the value, I think, and the exercise of modeling.
For sure. I mean, you go into a workshop and put a data model in front of a business person and they don't know what they're looking at. And it's the tool of our trade, I guess. It's the way we understand things. It's like relationships and attributes and primary keys, foreign keys, all that kind of stuff. That's not what the business want to see. They want to see what's in it for me. So, yeah, taking it down a level, for sure. And I think what I'm seeing anyway is that by reducing that level of complexity to some really basic concepts, business concepts, if you like, that's something that the business can latch onto. And I think it's a really useful enough data to feed into an AI to give that context for modeling. So I think it's a really good selling point for the business because it's not a massive overhead for them.
Over to me. All right.
Sorry.
I think businesses end up doing modeling anyway, because I think one of the first things you do when you try to figure out a business problem is you end up doing conceptual modeling anyway. Like, how is this related to that? And, you draw your Venn diagrams and, get all that right. I think also from an analytics data model, you're actually getting away with a lot in a sense, because the analytics domain is kind of like the repository of all the OLTP databases. All of that physical data modeling has already been done for you. You're kind of inheriting all of that already, and it's your job to just translate it to the business, right? So it ends up being a mapping sort of thing. So I think maybe with AI and whatnot, that the vision of modeling in general is a lot simpler because we're at this advantage space where we don't have to do all this physical modeling at the base. For example, Snowflake has never supported primary keys and foreign keys. It's basically they say you need to build your referential integrity into your data pipelines. It means that you can structure your data in any way you want, but the source models already have those business rules built into it. A lot of that work has been done for you already. It's up to you to how to present that data to the business user. So even from like just thinking about it, they're always talking about conceptual data modeling, logical data modeling, and physical. You don't really have to think too much about the physical because it's already been done for you. More about getting those relationships right and getting those metrics accurate is what it's really about. It's the way I see it anyway.
So what you're saying is you don't need to restructure the data to a target logical model. You base it on what the source is telling you.
You can, I mean, you're still after those three things out of any data model is, business keys, relationships, and change in state. But you don't have to, I mean, even when you bring the data into a platform, you don't take everything. Like if your source was SAP, you'd be importing 600 tables, right? You take what's needed, but even at that level, like the data types have been done for you, and it's just really a matter of getting that into a state that's queryable for your business users.
How do you know what you need? You don't
Speak to the business users.
Getting some spicy takes now. The back of the room has entered the chat. Here we go.
Thank you. I have a question about how would you scope the role of data modeler in this day and age in context of we coming from the traditional drawing diagrams, maintaining the data model almost as a separate asset, independent from the data. That's on one scale. And on the other scale, when you have a DBT repository with 10,000 models that developers are contributing to, and it seems very hard to keep that model as an independent asset in sync with whatever DBT is outputting. So there seems to be some kind of middle ground. How would you scope that data modeler role in this current development cycle? Thank you.
I would say do less modeling. Always try and do as little modeling as you can, and do what's best bang for buck, as I said before.
Would you call it just enough modeling?
Thank you.
There you go.
It's a little term that I think that's coming out a lot. I hear like just enough governance and just like do the minimum amount, because somebody's got to maintain it at the end of the day. Somebody's got to have to maintain that stuff. So the more you do, the more complexity you have. And then you get to a point where your platform is just too hard to change. It's just too complicated. So do as little as you can. So it's picking the right level. Now, the approach that I take is exactly that. I don't worry about modeling relationships because it's inherent in the source data. You want to pick out the business concepts, the big ticket items that tell you customer, product, all those kind of things that the business cares about. Define those things. It's actually a very, very short list generally. And then basically pick those business keys out of your source data. And those relationships that are then implied by the fact that you've got those business keys highlighted. So it's not much modeling. There's very little, but then you'll then find you've got a set of assets which the business can self-serve very, very easily, because they can, essentially it's like a library. Each of your assets has a business key which says it's aligned to these business concepts. You can look at those as a big grid, if you like, a big matrix, and you can go, oh, I can see that I can join this to this. Yeah. So you're not really modeling. You're just putting it in the appropriate shelf in your library. And it's a really quick way of getting a lot of assets into your warehouse. Like I said before, how much is enough? So if you've got a source system that has 600 tables, which we've dealt with in the past, you can go through those, pick out those business keys, and get those into your warehouse really, really quickly. You're not modeling any of that data. You're just picking out business keys. And that's a really fast way of kind of framing the scope in that you're restricting it to those business concepts. So it's a really fast way of getting a lot of data in, but still organizing it around something that's coherent and meaningful to the business.
That's pretty good. I would add that I think the most successful projects I've seen from a Data Vault perspective is when somebody with a similar title of enterprise architect or business architect is involved. Not to model, but to advise, because they know what these concepts mean to the rest of the business, especially where your business case fits in. So especially in large customers, they'll have a business architecture division, and they'll map out business capabilities. And each, let's say, insurance company has business capabilities, got lots of them, that each capability is based on a business object and how you manage it, and then how it relates to other capabilities. That is a good place to start, because from an analytical model perspective, what you don't want to do is model from the bottom up. You want to model from the top down. So whatever the business process or how it's represented in the source systems, it matters only in the sense that it's automating the business process for you. What the business interpretation of it is the most important thing out of the data. And the best advice is not only just the business itself, but enterprise architects and business architects, because they spend the most time of how to understand how these processes are automated and best serve your business case and your analytical project.
We had a few people just join, so for just the 30-second recap, we've got a couple experts on stage who have done so many different projects related to data modeling. We've talked about some of the myths of data modeling, that these projects take forever or that storage is cheap so you don't need to worry about it. We talked about doing just enough modeling was the topic we just had, and I've got a question here from Lee, but please raise your hand if you have a question you'd like to put to our experts.
Thanks, Chris. We talked about having to talk to the leaders to understand their requirements for modelling. One of the dissonance that I'm having at the moment is if we need to speak to them and they change, so the CEO changes or the head of marketing in 2 years changes, the dissonance between that and our ability to deliver these models quickly enough. My observation is that sometimes modelling can take multiple years. Are we at the problem where you paint the Tower of Bridge and then when you're finished, you just go back and paint it again? And can you close that gap in my head for me?
That goes with the territory, unfortunately. The data models are never done. You never finish them. They're always in constant flux. You need some kind of hard, I guess, posts or stumps that you build your building on. And I say one of the approaches I would take is by those business concepts. So it shouldn't matter. The business doesn't change. The concepts within the business doesn't change. But the business itself will change. They'll change source systems. As soon as they change a source system, then suddenly the language that the business are using changes. Project I worked on recently, we produced a very high-level data model. We talked about customers. But the system that they used didn't have a concept of a customer. They had account users. So we said, well, that's a customer, yeah? And they were like, no, that's account user. I say, is that the language you want to use? And they would say, absolutely. Now, in 10 years' time, when they switch that system out, that concept name will change. Is it the same thing? Don't know. But it will constantly change. Every time you bring a new source system in, you have to go back to your model, revisit it, and it will change. You just need to be agile enough about it. So again, don't do too much modeling. Don't bake too much into your data model, because if you do have to change it, it's a huge amount of work. So keep it light.
I have to agree, because I think that's one of the selling points of Data Vault anyway, is that its ability to change. If something has been switched off, then it's not populating your analytical model anymore. And the idea behind a Data Vault is that if there are new data sources, you just integrate. It's non-destructive to change. You don't have to break the existing structures just to import a new data source. But I can think of another way of analyzing that question is, okay, you got another CEO, but he hates Data Vault. So what? What do we do now? Well, you've got this data model that you're populating, that you're supporting for a few years now. Do you just turn it off and then your analysts can't get any analysis out of the data? So you end up building something else, or maybe just extending an existing model. But I also have to agree with the other point that you made as well, is it's part of the territory. I've been through a few migrations as well, where we went from Kimball to Vault, or a new CEO came in and we're in the middle of a project, or a reshuffle, not CEO, CTO. CEO doesn't care. The CTO will go, all right, I hate this modeling paradigm, let's switch it. Well, you can't just switch this off right away. Then you start building big, fat, white tables again. But I guess it's the nature of the business.
You guys are agreeing too much. I want spicy takes. All right, we got one over here.
We're experienced, that's the problem.
Thanks, guys. Like such an esteemed panel. Have multiple questions, but some of them would be related to the difference between Hook and Data Vault. I've been on a couple of Data Vault implementations. I'll take it offline with you. Another question is, like, what do you think about how to model next data products, autonomous data products that Jean-Marc was talking about in the beginning. What is the underlying data tables, data modeling techniques around joining these type of objects? But I have a question kind of related to the previous point about, like, the model, in my opinion, is as good as is reaction to change, because things will change, the CEOs, the opinions, the context, and the business itself.
Yep.
So how do you measure it, or do you have practical tips around comparing modeling techniques in terms of its ability to be rebuilt? And we're talking about rebuilding with a lot of history of that business. Thank you.
Start with, Data Vault is not meant to be queried, put it that way. Anybody who's worked with a Data Vault will know there's an explosion of tables, right? Which is part of the reason why it's sold as a flexible data model. So what ends up happening, or what's recommended, is that you build this layer that's a consumption layer, whether it's an OBT based on a Data Vault, because you've now guaranteed the auditability of your data at the foundation, and you can blow away that information mart layer at will. You can build OBTs, you can build Kimball models, doesn't matter, as long as it makes best use of the OLAP platform, which a lot of engineers don't focus on, that really should focus on, is when you run a query on top of your data model, what does my query pan look like? Not what it's doing in each node, but the shape of it. Because in fact, the shape of it tells you what algorithm it's using underneath. And you should always be going on an OLAP platform for what's called a right deep join tree. And a lot of engineers don't know that, but that's what you're aiming for, because it actually alleviates the need to have more memory and more compute to churn joins between tables, right? But what we generally recommend from a Data Vault perspective is that Data Vault's in the base and information marts on top. It can be built in any structure you want, as long as it answers the business questions accurately, and it's ephemeral. So tomorrow, if it does change, you just replace it. In my perspective, a business vault is an extension of the raw vault, which is BV, SATs, and links. Yeah. Above it is information marts, which I know is some Data Vault experts say, oh, it's part of the same thing. To me, it's not, because those other structures are ephemeral. Like pits and bridges, for example. I would call them information mart layer, because tomorrow I can blow it away and it doesn't affect my auditability of my Data Vault. So that's my perspective from it.
I've only got time for one or two more, I think. You got something to add to that one?
Well, I was just going to say, with Hook, we don't do that. The engineering of getting the data in is one part. The modeling is applied essentially afterwards. So if you do need to change your model, you're essentially just changing the keys that you sit over the top of those models. So it's a lot more flexible in that sense. And again, modeling in one track, engineering in another track, and then you join the two together. Yeah.
All right, the boss is saying only time for one more. Here it is.
This is a question about the model of data models. So you've talked about enterprise data models. I think you've also talked about models specific for a warehouse. My question is, do you see different flavors of data models that should exist in an organization that may be tightly coupled, loosely coupled, to avoid having to change them every time your system changes, as you've just outlined?
Yeah, I say always be as loosely coupled as you can. When you're tightly coupled to your data model, there is a risk, like you say, when a source system changes, square peg, round hole, it doesn't fit.
So we're coupling, but what are the main flavors of data model that you would see in an organization as this might be a starting point to the answer to the question? So you've got enterprise data model.
Yep.
What else?
Yeah, certainly enterprise data model. Again, at a certain level. Obviously, you don't want to go getting down to a lot of detail, and using that as a framework to organize the data within your warehouse. But any flavor of data model, physical data modeling, it's entirely up to you. It's a choice. You want to do Kimball, that's fine. You want to do Data Vault, that's fine. If you want to do Hook, that's absolutely fine. But you've got those layers. You know, conceptual model is a really good starting point and a foundational piece. But beyond that, when you get into your physical environment, yeah, all bets are off.
he's going to pull out a hook and yank us off stage. So I know we didn't get to all the
One thing-
questions.
Sorry, one thing.
Oh, you're going to
But-
go for it.
But one thing we don't see a lot of anymore is third normal form models in an analytical platform.
No.
Those are great for RLTP because the referential integrity enforces the business rules by the structures, where we want the opposite in an analytical platform. We need that flexibility.
All right, please thank Andrew and Patrick.